So here we are now going to talk about the spending multiplier, and this will be lecture 4 of chapter 8. And so at the last lecture, we saw that we increased investment by $200 billion, but equilibrium level went up by 1,000 from 6,000 to 7,000. And so magically again, this 200 billion multiplied 5 times to give us the $1,000 billion increase in income. So why 5? How does this 5 fit in? And again, this goes back to Keynes, felt that any initial change of spending would be exacerbated, would be increased. Or actually, I shouldn't say increased, it could also work in the other way. So the good sign for this is that a little bit of spending can give us a larger increase in income in a positive way, but it also works in the negative way. If we have a small amount of decrease in investment, that can multiply to a much larger decrease in production national income. So it's like it's a double-edged sword. It works good if spending's going up, but it can also cause the economy to collapse in a short period of time when we have a fair amount of decrease in, say, just investment. And investment could go down just because of, again, lack of animal spirits, lack of expectations. So any sudden increase or decrease in planned investment spending, or any spending for that matter, will lead to larger changes in overall national spending, aggregate expenditures, which would lead to large changes in income. Again, any spending, but again, we talked about this in chapter 6 on GDP. Consumption spending tends to be more stable than investment spending. Even though we can cut back on our durables, we still have to pay for rent, we have to pay for food, medicine, heating bills, things like that. Where investment spending can dry up to zero easily. I mean, business does not need to invest next year. It's like for you buying a durable good. You don't need to buy that new car. You can get by with an old car. You can use Uber. You have alternatives. So let's follow this idea of a multiplier. And again, it all works because money does not disappear once spent. It becomes someone else's income. So down here, let's have an example. And I'm going to start out with, say, $200 billion investment like we did. And we're going to follow it through what I call rounds of economic activity. And we're going to have a multiplier. I'm sorry, we'll get to the multiplier. We're going to have an MPC. What's an MPC? I don't know what MPB is. MPC is 0.8. And let's start out by putting our $200 billion right here. Now, once that money gets spent, it is part of our income. But we have no change in consumption yet and no change in savings. So I'll put NC there. But what happens is that when that money gets spent, it becomes someone's income. Well, whoever receives it is going to break it down into round 2 into part consumption, part savings. So 80% of that, so if you take 80% times 200, take my calculator, that'd be 1,600. For round 2, so all the people who received $200 billion of that money for investment are now going to spend 80% of that if the MPC is 0.8. In reality, some would spend a bit more, some would spend a bit less, but it will be spent. Most of it will be spent. And then the other 40 comes over here for savings. And these are all pluses that are going up. And so in round 2, when this money gets spent, it now is part of aggregate expenditures. This was from investment, this is from consumption. And once it gets spent, it also is going to drive up income as well for the next round. So that money gets spent and now becomes income for other people. The ones here went out, local restaurants, they went out to get a drink after work, they bought some groceries, they got the car repaired. That money goes somewhere. And so in round 3, whoever received that money is going to take 80% of that, which is 128, and that's going to go right there. And then 160 minus 128 is 32 right there. So the numbers are getting smaller, but they're still adding up. And then that, once it gets spent, it's now in aggregate expenditures, 128. And then over here, it's now part of our income. And then for round 4, we're going to take the $128 billion of income generated in round 3. Round 3, we're going to now spend it. So a portion is going to go there for consumption, a portion goes there for savings. So you take 128 times 0.8 that'll be 102.4. And then I take 128 minus 102.4, I get 25.6. And so in round, these are billions. And so in round 4, once the 102.4 gets spent, it's now over here. And so on. And so on and so on. How long can I do this? I can do this forever. I can take 80% of numbers forever and never get to 0. But mathematically, most of the numbers will add up pretty fast, and usually about maybe round 10, 15, we get most of the impact from this multiplier effect. Now what we have here is we have an infinite series. It's converging to 0. So even though it's an infinite series, if they're converging to 0, we have a way in mathematics to get the sum for that number as well, because each round they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Eventually it's going to hit a point that's going to be in terms of a sum of a series. And now, if you were to add all these rounds here, you'll come up with the following totals. And this would be 800 billion. These will add up to 200 billion. These will add up both, because they're the same numbers, to 1,000 billion. And so we have the 200 billion from investment. That generated another 800 billion in consumption. Together, that's where we got the 1,000 billion here for both income and for expenditures. So $200 billion of investment caused another $800 billion of consumption. All that money triggered all these rounds of spending to create that much more in consumption. All this depends on the MPC. Think about it in, say, round 2. If I would have made the MPC 0.9 instead of 0.8, that would have been 180 billion. That would have been 180. That would have been more. They all would be more. And that would be more, and that would be more, and that would be more. If I made it, say, 0.6, that would be 120 less. All the other rounds would be less as well. So the MPC is what determines what the effect is going to be. And it's pretty simple that a higher MPC is going to increase the multiplier effect, and a lower MPC is going to lower the multiplier effect. It's actually a very simple equation that I'm not going to show you where it comes from. It comes from the mathematics for the summation of the infinite series. We're just going to take it as a given truth to us from the economic odds. And so your spending multiplier, and that'll be SM, will be equal to 1 over 1 minus the MPC. So 1 over 1 minus the MPC is your multiplier. If you think about it, 1 minus the MPC, well, that is your MPS, right? So you can also write it as 1 over the MPS. Either way, it's the same number. In this case, we had our MPC is 0.8. So 1 over 1 minus 0.8 is 1 over 0.2, which is the MPS, right? And 20 cents goes into $1 5 times. And that is where I got this 5 up here. That is your multiplier. I guess I'll break this up into 2 parts. Don't do too much at one time. And so I'll stop there, and I'll come back for one more part for lecture 4, and then we'll be done with chapter 8.